All right, so welcome to Understanding Training Zones. My name is Cynthia. I go by Chi. A lot of you guys know me as Chi. It's my nickname from childhood. And I wanted to do this seminar on training zones because it's a topic that I get asked a lot. From the very first time that somebody starts training with me, because I'm going to give you training zone workouts, to people just asking me about the training zones just literally on a ride. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to sit down and just lay the whole foundation of what we're talking about when we talk about training zones. As I mentioned, my name is Chi. I have a degree in sports med, so my education started way back in the 90s. I am a USA cycling coach. I am also proud to be a skills coach and strength performance coach through Exos. I put spin instructor, don't laugh at that. But that was a big pivotal point because when I was teaching spin about 15 years ago, it's when it started to come out. Well, I guess it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And it was important for cyclists that were riding to train indoors. And that's kind of how it started. And when I started teaching it, I didn't realize that that's what it was about. And so then I realized that it was actually for riding and training. And then I got more interested in what it was all about, the training zones. And it really kind of got this whole idea of physiology mixed with cycling and performance together. So it was really important. So I'm a cycling coach and I work with high achieving individuals. And why I say that is because there's no shortcuts here. What we're doing is for the long game. And so nobody's looking for a shortcut here or a quick pill. At least that's my experience. So the people here in this room right now, I'm assuming that all of you guys are like that, high achieving individuals. You guys work hard for what you get. You guys want to train hard. You want to feel better on your bike. And that's pretty much how I treat my athletes and who I work with. In addition to my education, I've also done a lot of riding myself. I've done cross-country racing, cross-country endurance racing, gravel, bike packing, mountain bike stage racing, triathlons, enduros. And I don't know if I miss anything, but that's about it. I also am the host of Local Legends podcast. So what are we all here for? As I mentioned, we all want to be our best selves. That's my assumption of everybody here. That's my assumption with my athletes, and that's who I am. I always want to be my better self and show up. So training hard is really important. And I think most of you guys like to train hard or work hard if it matters. You don't want to just train hard just for the sake of training hard. And we're not afraid of working. Like, you tell me what to do, Chi, and I will do that. We don't have a lot of time. Most of you guys also are not adults. Well, you guys are all adults. Your parents, you got work, you're trying to manage a few things, and you want to kick ass. So this is why we're here. This is why we're talking about all of these things. So here we go. Understanding training zones. I just wanted to kind of set the stage of who you guys are and what we're going to talk about today. Here's the agenda. We're going to talk about energy systems. We're going to talk about the zones. That is going to be where most of our conversation is going to be, because I really, really want you guys to understand the first two bullet points. Then we're going to talk about how do you know your zones, which one's better, if there is, heart rate or power. We're talking about how to train with them, and then some insights that I've seen to get the best out of your training with the zones. Okay, so I'm going to talk about energy systems, and there's three main energy systems I want to talk about. And the reason why is because everything's going to come back to why are we training in zones? What are we doing? So if you know what we're training for, then the zones are going to make a lot more sense. The reason why I have a traffic jam is because I want to use different size vehicles as different energy zones to help you guys kind of just figure out the main picture of what we're talking about with energy zones. So if you've never had exercise physiology, or you've had a little bit of it, some of this will be kind of a refresher. Some of you have kind of heard of it and want to know more. This is where you're going to get a little bit more information. The whole reason what we need to do for energy whenever we exercise, whatever we're doing, is ATP. That is our currency for life in our cells. That's as far as I'm going to go. ATP, you can see what it's spelled for, but we need this currency if we want to move, if we want to get faster, if we want to use our muscles to go to do the things that we want to do, go up the hill, all those things. So the first energy system is oxidative, and it's like a bus. It's slow, it has a lot of passengers, and it kind of just hums along. So we use fat. We have lots of fat on our body. And I'm not saying that in a way that's negative. I'm just saying we have fat in our body and there's plenty there to use. One fat molecule is equivalent to 460 ATP. You don't have to memorize that, but I just want to kind of set the stage of what it is. So when you think of oxidative, think of your heart. You think of blood vessels, it's going to your muscles. On a walk on the beach, an easy ride spin, you're using fat. So I'm not going to get down the rabbit hole of fat burning, but this is where some people will say this is fat burning. Sure, it's fat burning. But it's very, very, very effective at giving you energy. You just have to move slow so that the body can give you the ATP that it needs. The next system is glycolysis. It's like a Suburban. Okay, so it has less passengers. It moves a little faster. You can get in and out really easy, a little bit easier than loaded up a bus. I don't know if you've ever been on a bus, but it's a slow process. And the body uses glycogen. Now we have glycogen in our muscles and we have glycogen stored in our liver. We can also consume sugar or carbohydrates and use glycogen there. We only make 360 ATP for one glucose molecule, so not as much. So now you know why it's good to have the oxidative there. But it gets to you faster. So you're able to utilize it, the energy, the ATP faster from one molecule of glucose. The last one is like a Formula One car. How many people are in a Formula One car? One person. Not very effective, right? But it can produce it immediately. So normally you only really see people using ATP CP system for something that's 15 seconds. So a power lifter, someone, I'm going with a violent thing with like a punch, but something really explosive. Limited quantity. So again, after about 15 seconds, it's depleted and you need to rest. The body restores itself, ready to go. It's within the muscle, does not need any oxygen. So those three systems look like this in theory. So the bottom line, so I'm going to kind of use my cursor here. This line is effort and time. And then this is the energy being used. So if you're going really quickly, you're going to use the blue line, which is the ATP. The red line is glycolysis right here. And then the green line is oxidative. So over time, you're going to see how your oxidative is being used more. The reason why I want you to see that, and hopefully this graph does a good job, is that no one energy system is being used the whole time. There are always overlapping. They're buddies. Just like that traffic jam, you're going to have buses together with Suburbans and a Formula One every so often in there. Not as much. You have to definitely need to use that. But these two are kind of partners in crime, the glycolysis and the oxidative. So now we're going to talk about the zones. So now you know the three energy systems. And now the zones are going to overlap with them. So the way we can measure our training is through effort. The biggest ways to do it is through heart rate. And there's a guy checking his pulse, and through power. And you can measure power through your crank or your Zwift or wherever you have on your bike. I'll talk about perceived exertion a little bit later, but we're going to focus on heart rate and power. So the first one is heart rate. And what this graph is showing you is that as exercise increases, so this is, even though it's like duration, it's more about intensity, heart rate goes up pretty linearly. So if I'm walking on the beach, my heart rate's 80, I do a jog, it goes to 90, sprint, keep going. It's pretty linear. And there's a small deflection, and then it just tops off, right? You cannot go anywhere faster than your heart rate max. So just in case you didn't recognize that that's how the heart rate work. It's a very linear thing. So a lot of times you can extrapolate if you're have a heart rate, you can kind of extrapolate what your heart rate max is. But on the whole, when you look at your percentage in your training zones, you're going to see how they're kind of evenly split, about 20 beats per minute per zone. When you look at your power on the same type of scale, this is more, again, this is time down below, and this is power. You can see that you have a lot of power. This person, I don't know, about 1400 watts. That's quite a lot. But this person has 318 watt FTP. We'll talk about FTP in a second. But you can see that you have anaerobic power, and then you have your aerobic power. It is not linear. It's a little bit more of like a I want to say like a ramp or some kind of like snowboarding down a nice mountain. So two different graphs, and you'll see why the percentages look a little different. And that's mostly why is that there's a bigger drop off and then it levels out. Okay, keep going with me, stay with me. Okay, we're going to talk about energy systems all together with these two graphs. All right, so I'm going to keep this person's name on there. I love this graph because it combines all the things we were talking about and now introduces the heart rate zones. You're going to ask me like, Chi, why are there 6 zones? Are there 5 zones? Today we're going to talk about 6. There is a 7th, but I'm not going to talk about that one, mostly because it applies very, very few to our situation. So let me just, before I go into the zones, I just want you to see what's behind the graph. So in this line, here's your heart rate. So you can see kind of linear, goes up and then holds back. I don't really like this green one. It looks like a step. The watch should be a little bit more of like going up this way. But you can see fat and carbohydrates. You can see back behind here what energy system is being used. I guess this is the fat right here. So you can see how they all overlap together. So we have zone 1, recovery, zone 2, endurance, zone 3, tempo. So you see how the aerobic, this is mostly very, very aerobic. Zone 3, 4, now we're kind of getting a little bit more work, and then anaerobic work, 5 and 6. So that's a really, really high level of your energy zones on top of your power and your heart rate, on top of your energy systems. Let's go into each zone a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to talk about, and again, this is high level, but I do want to set the stage of what is important for each of the zones. Zone 1 is really important. It's not going to give you any adaptations per se for training. What it does is that it gives fresh blood back to your working muscles so that you can recover better. That is the main reason to be in recovery mode. You can be in recovery mode on a day. So you can have a recovery 1 ride. You can have a recovery ride like at the end of your workout. So go, nice and easy, get the blood flow back into your muscles. A lot of times, I'll be honest with you guys as well, by the end of a long, long ride, I just want to get home. Like zone 1, I'll do that tomorrow. But it's a good practice as well, just to kind of give yourself some time. It's also great to do. I like this girl. I know she doesn't have a helmet on. That's the only thing I didn't like about this, but she's having a good time. She's, looking around. It's also something that is really important that I find for athletes is to give themselves a mental break. Training in zones, especially the harder ones, is mentally very, very exhausting and challenging if you don't refuel your energy bucket of life. So doing a recovery ride gives you permission to slow the F down, enjoy what's around you, and just soak it in. Around here, I'm in San Diego, near Double Peak. I'm not going to do my recovery ride around my house. There's only hills. So when doing this kind of ride, you want to go try to find an area that's flat. Go on the 101, go find a lake that you can go around. Give yourself the time so that you can spin your legs. Zone 1, recovery. Okay. Zone 2 is endurance. This is my good friend Laura May. I love this picture because, she's chilling. She's having a good time. She's in the front. She's in zone 2. She's talking. So in this heart rate zone, and I'm going to give you guys a snapshot of these percentages. I just want you guys to kind of get an idea of what they look like. This is building your aerobic engine. This is really, really, really key. I think my favorite thing in life besides food is mitochondria and like all these systems. This is where the mitochondria in your body gets like dense. It's like a party in your quads. That's the energy that creates, or that's the house that creates the ATP. You got capillaries, you're building the, I guess if we're using the bus as analogy, we're building the roads to let the buses go through. It also helps with plasma volume. And I know this sounds really weird, but as athletes, we get more plasma in our blood, which is super, super cool. More blood means more red blood cells, more oxygen to your body. So this is all getting the infrastructure in place for harder training. So remember that zone 2, you can do some hills on zone 2. You just have to, have the right gearing and spin the legs. But zone 2 is also a really good place, in my opinion, to work on thoughts too. So if you have like a stressful day and you, like if one of my clients said, I just can't train, I just have too much going on. Really good thing is just go on a zone 2 ride and go just collect yourself. It's a really good place mentally to just reflect. All right, zone 3, tempo. So this looks like La Costa. We're probably climbing a mountain here. Tempo is the meat and potatoes. This is where I love to do a lot of the training, especially for my endurance athletes, actually cross country, all the above. This is getting close to your FTP and your lactic threshold. So this is no joke. There is some work here. The purpose is to work on your aerobic efficiency. And then again, some more good stuff happening within the muscle. It also, now we start to work on our strength endurance. We start working on our hill climb and getting, this is why I put this picture in here. We're doing some hills. So we're getting some stronger in our muscles, not just our cardiovascular system. What else am I going to say about zone 2? The reason why I also like zone 2 is it's really, really effective at improving the glycolysis system, the part where you're converting glucose to ATP. And it doesn't do it in a way that breaks you down hard. So you can do a zone 3 ride and not feel wiped out at the end of the day or the end of the night. So that's really, really important for a lot of athletes who, one, have busy lives and they need to have the wherewithal to take care of their family and go back to work and all that. They can't just be smashed at the end of the day. Also good if you like to do subsequent workouts. A zone 3 ride works really well. The next day you can, depending on how your fitness is, you can do another great workout the next day. And the combination of the zone 3 and zone 2 rides has a cumulative effect on your training overall. So really powerful stuff here. And again, meat potatoes, that's very, very true. All right, zone 4. Now we're talking about some sexy stuff here. Zone 4 is your threshold. You can see the percentages are very, very close. They're right below and right above where your limit is. This type of training is what you want if you want to go faster, if you want to get on the front of the pack, if you want to keep up with your friends, all those good things. And I say that because there's people, that's a very big thing, you don't want to be dropped. So lactic threshold is really, really important. Here are some of the benefits. I won't list them all of training in threshold, but you'll see some of the same terminologies that we've already talked about with the mitochondria, yay there, but also we're looking at improving your fast twitch muscles. I like the stroke volume too, because now you're actually breathing hard. You're really, really working to get the work done. This actual picture is at Downeyville. I kind of like it because I see all these people behind me, but I like it because it's a race. It's an 8-mile ride up this hill and then a 20-30 minute descent. So there's for sure working on your heart rate threshold. All right, zone 5, the VO2 max phase, right? Everybody knows that feeling when you've gone past your max and you can't really like catch your breath. VO2 max is, if you've heard, it's volume oxygen maximum. So the maximum amount of the volume of oxygen your body can utilize. So all those things we've mentioned before, your mitochondria, your stroke volume, your plasma, all those things, this is where the zone 5 is showcased. How can you handle that? And you're barely meeting the demands that your body's needing of you. This is above your your threshold. This is 105. I start it because there's no such, you can't get much farther than your threshold. I mean, it's hard to, well, you can get above it, but to measure it in the time is also really hard. So I'll talk about this with the pros and cons of heart rate monitors. The power is 106 to 120. You're definitely reaching over your FTP. And here are some of the benefits of training in that heart rate zone. All right, one more zone, zone 6, anaerobic. There is no heart rate for this. There's no number, doesn't exist. And it's 150, can even be a little bit more, 200% of your FTP. So these are efforts that are 2 minutes or less. They're very intense. They're hard. It's, you're basically like spitting out your side of your face. Like it's all out. It takes everything you can to be in the zone. This aerobic zone is really, really important for people who are cross-country racers, who have really steep, pitchy climbs, very specific to that. Somebody that has to do something that's really, really quick and then recover, maybe an enduro racer. You have an endurance race, an enduro race, you have to climb a little bit, descend, sprint up a little bit, descend. So sometimes those little efforts is exactly what you're doing on those races. You can see some of the benefits of your zone 6, a lot more power, fast twitch muscles. We didn't really talk about the muscle fibers. And this is the only energy zone that actually increases your ATP energy source. So that one energy system, this is the only one that actually influences that, that one, energy zone. Whew, okay, here is a overview of all the energy zones, the percentages. The RPE to me is a little bit funny because I would put LT, I would put VO2 as a 10. So I don't know if I would find it as 6, 7, but you can kind of see where the intervals for, look at this, endurance 14 days. So you can see where you'd be training in them. While you guys are looking at that, I just wanted to pause and see if there was any questions. Michelle's asking about sweet spot. So let me talk about sweet spot before I go into the next information about how to find your zones. So sweet spot is between, I call it zone 3.5. And I actually have my cheat sheet here. Sweet spot is 87 to 97% of your lactic threshold, or about the same for your power. Spot is a place where I use for a lot of my endurance athletes. The reason why is because you stay right below your lactic threshold of 100%, and you're able to stay for the most part very, very aerobic without burning up the engine too much, for lack of a better word. So you're kind of got a bunch of Suburbans and you're just at the edge of Formula One racer, but you're not there yet. If you get too far up, you're gonna burn yourself out. So 3.5 is sweet spot right here, right below lactic threshold, 87 to 97%. Okay, so great question is, how do you find your lactic threshold? All right, so let's find these out. And the reason why we need to know our zones is to train in each of these zones, is the whole point of it is to get the energy system that you are trying to work. So if you are trying to work your zone 2 and you're in zone 4, you're going to be training the wrong energy zone. You're going to feel like you're and this happens. So I'll give somebody a training and I don't know their heart rate zones, and I see a sad face when it should have been a zone 2. And I know something's wrong. Like it should have been happy. That's what I said. Remember, zone 2 is where you have happy thoughts and you can think through stuff. And if you're not having a good day, something's wrong. So knowing where your zones are is really important so that you can be in the right zone. This is how you figure it out. You have to test. You can, technically you test for an hour. That's kind of like the gold standard. A lot of people don't want to test for an hour. And then where do you go? And there's just some complications. So there's a couple of main ways to do this. You get an FTP of 20 minutes. Most of my clients get the 20-minute test, especially if they have an indoor bike. It's very easy to do. It's about an hour and 10 minutes with your warm up. And you basically go as hard as you can for 20 minutes, keep your cadence up at 90, and let's see what happens. The next one is the 8-minute CTS is Carmichael's training systems. He's a coach, and I actually really, really like this 8-minute field test. You go find a hill like Black Mountain, and you go up and you do this twice. And then you get a calculation and you get the information. There's also, and I don't use this at all, but I used to use this with my spin classes, a 2-minute heart rate test where I mentioned the heart rate goes very linear. You use that and you kind of extrapolate out what your threshold or max is. So another way of finding your heart rate is going on a race. So I wanted to share this. This is a Strava image. A lot of you guys, I assume, are on Strava. It's a free app. This is why I'm going to share it. This one is an hour and 45-minute cross-country race, and we're looking at this line right here. Can you imagine a line any straighter? That is what threshold line looks like. It doesn't have a bunch of ups and downs. It pretty much is flat line. And then you know that's your threshold heart rate. So here's my average. That was my max. Couldn't get any better than that. The reason why I do like races is because you go out on a test and you go as hard as you can. It's very subjective. You're like, I'm going hard. Can you go harder? I don't know. You go on a race and then you see what you can do for an hour. That's what you can do for an hour. That is the test. Here below is the 8-minute Carmichael test. So, okay, let me give you one more thing about this though. Power was not a good indicator. On a mountain bike race, you don't see the terrain. The terrain is up and down and up and down and up and down. So my power was all over the place. So I don't use my threshold for that. I just use my heart rate. This one, you can see the benefits of, and this is a picture, so I can't, click on it. But you can see the heart rate is very consistent. That's this one up here. It looks like a little block. You can see the cadence. The cadence on the other one wasn't as clean because of, anyway, it's a cross-country race. This one's a constant pedal. You can kind of see that that's a constant pedal. So you can see the benefits of a test and what it offers. It's 8 minutes. So I have to kind of do a little bit of calculation, but this is a very well done test. This is what it looks like. It's like I mentioned, it's about a little over an hour. There's a little bit of cool down. But that's what it looks like in case you've never seen what the test looks like. I don't use 220 minus your age because it's a very general way of looking at your heart rate, but it doesn't give you information that's applicable. My husband and I are about the exact same age and our heart rate maxes are completely different, and just testament to, you just can't put that on there. So I would rather use heart rate threshold so that you know where that line is. So I just use my numbers so that you guys can see it. So what I would do now, if you were to take a test, is to calculate your heart rate threshold. Here are the percentages. Here's your FTP. Here are the percentages. And now you know your numbers. Now I know when I do a zone 2 ride, it's 105 to 25. I mentioned that heart rate is linear. You're about 20 beats. The power is a little bit different. It's not going to be as like blocked out the same way. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like. What do you do with that information? Okay. So then once you get that, these are now practical tips. You're going to update all your apps. You're going to update your Garmin. This is what it looks like inside of Strava. You can customize your heart rate there. You can put your functional power there. you can update Training Peaks if you have an account. I do that for my clients. I update there, and it kind of fine tunes it as you go. You can kind of shift things around. And then Zwift. And I tell you that because I have people that have been, I update Training Peaks, people don't update Zwift. Zwift overrides my Training Peaks. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what just happened? And they didn't update their stuff. So just make sure all your things are lined up, whatever you choose. All right. The biggest question I always get is power versus heart rate. Just so you know, I am not one or the other. You're going to meet people who say it's always power, always, or always whatever. I am one of those people that might think that you need to use the tools to your advantage. So which one is best? It depends. There's the answer. So as far as cost efficiency, heart rate will win hands down. All you need to do is wear a heart rate monitor. You got it on, a lot of people use their watch. Easy power meter is a little pricey. I would never tell somebody to go buy a power meter just so they could measure their stuff. It's about $600, maybe a little bit more depending on what you get. So as far as like using your zones, I would use heart rate works. Accuracy, power, hands down. If you're going to go do a 2-minute VO2 max, I would rather have a power meter than my heart rate monitor. My heart rate monitor will not have my heart rate reflect my effort in the time that I'm doing it. So in 2 minutes, it's not going to get up to 160. It may get up to 145. I'm out of breath. I go home. It doesn't look like I was in the right zone. So power meter will win every time for accuracy. Where I see that the power doesn't work as well is if you're a downhill biker, you're working your ass off. So if you've ever gone downhilling off of Big Bear, you know that you are out of breath when you get to the bottom and you've maybe pedaled 10 times. So all that work that you're doing to isolate your lower body, to use your upper body, to pump the corners, all of that does not reflect in your power at all. So I think that's why I think heart rate is good. One thing I wanted to mention here is rate of perceived exertion. So there was that chart that had 1 through 10. So a lot of times I'll have people use rate of perceived exertion that you don't have a power meter. You have to learn to get really, really good. So you can't just say, well, that was hard. Like you're going to have to find what that hard a VO2 max versus a 30-second sprint versus a 10-minute threshold. They're all hard. So which is the right amount of pressure that you need to put to be successful? One thing that you get though from that is that you get to learn yourself a little bit better. So if you're open to that, that's another opportunity to kind of get to know not who you are, but get to know yourself a little bit more in your efforts. Okay. So how to apply this for your training. This is the next two information is, I'm hoping that this is some good takeaways for you. The first two questions I'm going to ask you. So if one person put their hand up right now and like, well, how do I use it? Well, what are you training for? Like, are you doing a cross country race? When is it? Is this your A race? Like, are you doing the BWR? How far away is it? And where are you in the season? We're in February. If it was June, it would be different response than now. So those are the biggest questions you want to think about. My biggest thing is have a really strong base period before your season. So we're basically out of base season right now, but you want to get some zone 2-3 rides a lot. That's something that we do when I do my gravel groups. The first month is all base period training. For endurance races, I would start to add some threshold work 2 months before your A race. And I asterisk this because there's a lot of endurance racers, like gravel racers, will have multiple races on their schedule. So sometimes the first race is your endurance ride. The second race, let's work on, a different approach, maybe more sweet spot work. And then you wait for the end. It's a lot of work to work on your threshold from the very get-go, especially if you haven't had your base training, and work on that FTP. This is for people who really want to get their speed up on endurance race. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but when I first asked how long is your race, and if you've been doing 10 hours and you want to get 8 hours in your BWR, you better work on that upper limit and start to practice that. Cross country racers, I would suggest threshold and VO2 work into your training. And I mean that by like having an hour and a half race. If you're doing over the humps or quick and dirty races, you're pretty much in this area the whole time. I'd mentioned enduro, BMX, sprinters. You're going to want to add some zone 6 work in there. And then I recommend 1 to 2 hard workouts per week. Everybody's a little bit different, but if you try to put too much into your training, you're going to zap your legs and they won't work for you very well. So, and I also include a super long ride is considered a hard workout. So keep that in mind. Like before a race day, I wouldn't put in a hard workout on that same day. Okay. Here are some other insights that I wanted to share with you guys about how if I was to leave you right now, I would want to leave you with a little bit more insights on how to use these zones. So I mentioned the strong base. I cannot overemphasize how important that makes you as a rider and a racer. I think of it as a diver that is trying to dive off the edge of the pool. Like, all right, you're not going to go very far. So you want to get on the high dive board. You need to earn those steps to the high board. You can't just walk up and get there. So if you want to be a really strong racer, you need to have a really, really strong base. Next, sorry, is master the basics. Don't think the basics are for, oh, I don't have time for that. The basics are what's going to make you faster and more disciplined. 1, be very, very consistent. So the consistency is probably going to be the most important thing. There's a cumulative effect of your training. Make sure you're fueling, you have energy on your ride, you have a water bottle. Keep working on that cadence. So if you're always mashing on the pedals, there's a time to mash and there's a time to spin. Make sure you have a good balance of all of those things. Have a good warm-up plan. Check your form or have somebody check your form. Make sure you have heavy pedals, light hands. So don't overlook the things that you do every day on the bike. Be mentally ready for the hard workout. So tomorrow is a hard workout day and you just got slammed at work. That hard workout is going to feel 3 times as hard as it should, and it's already going to feel hard. So give yourself some time to either decompress or reset or move it to a different day or a different time. So just have a heads up on that. Know your zones. Before I got a computer, I used to write my heart rate zones on my arm on a Sharpie. I've also put get what's it called, one of those sticky notes, and tape it to my handlebars. Use your head unit. You can if you use Training Peaks, you can export it and then import it onto your Garmin, and it'll go beep beep beep. Okay, go. And it makes life so much easier. If you train outdoors, so that's me, I don't have an indoor bike, you have to go and find your route. So I think it's kind of fun. I'm like, okay, I need to do a tempo ride. What do I want to do? I want to do hill repeats. I go find some good mountain bike trails nearby. So it kind of makes it more of like a downhill, but I have to climb up. So I don't know, it's a win-win. Also, don't overlook cross training and strength training. So when you cross train, so let's say you go on a 30-minute run, guess what? You're training in your zone and you're giving your legs a break. So that's why a lot of times I give that to my athletes. I'm like, I don't tell them that specifically. I also want them to move a little differently, but you're still training. You're just not training the muscle, you're giving the legs a little bit of break, and you're making your heart work still. And then strength training, opposite. You're working your legs, you're getting the threshold and the power in there, and you don't have to go and kick your ass out on the hill for like an hour and a half. You go on a half-hour strength training and you get the same benefits. Also, when it's time to go hard, like leave everything out on the road, the trail, the trainer. And when it's time to go easy, back off. It's when people go kind of in the middle and then kind of in the outside that you don't get the adaptations that you need. Whew. Okay, let me make sure I got all the notes. Okay. Conclusion. training your zones will make you faster. I promise you, especially once you get your base, work the threshold, work that VO2, huge improvements. Give yourself about a week or two, you'll start to feel the shift. You won't feel the workout the next day, maybe not even that weekend. You'll feel it down the road. So give it a little time, especially the VO2 work. Recognize that the power of feeling, and skills and race day. So what I just mentioned is getting you fast and strong. But if you don't have the skills to do a climb or go descend, that's going to work against you. If you're not eating on the ride, doesn't matter how fit you are, you're not going to keep going. And if you don't have a plan on race day, then again, you may have the best fitness of the day, but you may not win the race. And also make sure to keep it fun. Sometimes training in zones can kind of, over time, like, I just want to go ride my bike. Go ride your bike. This picture was actually taken at San Clemente. I can't think of the name right off the top of my head. I'm sure one of you guys recognize it. And it's a long climb, but it's such a fun descent, and it just makes, everything a little bit easier. So making sure you have fun is really, really important. All right. So what questions do you have for me?
Okay, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So with the different apps that are out there between the Garmin and Strava and Training Peaks, and I feel like there's all these different, oftentimes I'll take a ride and it'll upload to all these different apps, and different, some will be like, oh, you did great. And others are like, well, that was mediocre and not so much. And so I don't understand, or is there one that's better than the other? Should I stick to one?
I know Garmin has a lot to say about your training, huh? Like,
right.
I think, I'm not quite sure. I should look up what their reasoning is behind all that. Like, you're detraining, you're like, I just went on a ride. That's why I personally like Training Peaks, because it gives you the stress score, and you can extrapolate how you're doing from that. There's also other numbers on Training Peaks that maybe I can do a Training Peaks one where it looks at the power to heart rate ratio. And when you're fatigued, it's negative. And when you're in a good place, it's positive. And I don't really talk about that too much. So maybe if kind of like this, I give you the information and then you can see what it is. Also, just verify that all your numbers are aligned in all of them. So they all should have similar information. And I know someone that used to work at Strava. And I don't know, I hope this doesn't come, well, you don't know who it is, but he's like, those numbers, they don't really know what they're talking about. Like when they're like your suffer score, like there's like, it is what it is. So be careful where that information is coming from, is basically what I'm saying.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Maria.
Yeah, I have a question. You said base training in zone 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So zone 2, 3, how many months do you think, like?
Oh, that's a good question. I usually go between 2 or 3 months of base training, but yeah.
2 to 3 months, huh? Okay.
I mean, that's me being very conservative coach. Like I usually start in December, maybe November, December, January. Now we're in the end of it. For a lot of people, that's what it looks like. That are doing the gravel races. So, and I know you don't do that, you're in the road, but you've been riding for a long time. So it's just fine-tuning that. And then also, Maria, there's a couple of things too, and I'm not saying this is you, but I didn't mention this. You need to, when you use a power meter, you need to calibrate it every time. So make sure you're doing that.
Okay.
And there's a sensor and it says calibrate, and you don't step on it, you don't move, at least mine, you don't move it. And then that way it shows good numbers. And then also I mentioned also that a lot of times with power and heart rate, there's small shifts, and like maybe it's 10 watts less or 10 watts more. And I can usually kind of start to see trends like that coming up. So so if it feels hard, a zone 2 feels hard, it may be too much. And so use heart rate over power sometimes. If your heart rate's in zone 3, 4,
Okay.
pull it back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. I know, Vanita, you had your mic off.
Yeah, I was just wondering what mountain is good to do the 8-minute field test on?
Black Mountain.
Black Mountain.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do like that one because it's wide enough too, and it doesn't have a lot of steep sections. There are some around here in San Marcos area that are steep, but they're too steep. And
Okay.
you want to try to have your cadence at around 80 for mountain bikers, maybe 80, 85, but a little bit faster.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And I only mentioned this because Ed's on the call too. I've been wanting to put together like a clinic in a way where I can help people to do it. It's it brings out the OCD in me because it has to be done in a very specific way. And if people are like, I just want to ride my bike, then it's not like that. But if people are like, actually, I do want to. Okay. So from here to here, we're going to go really hard for like 1 minute. Okay, go. And then, but if I do this with a bunch of people, then everybody has to be on the exact same page. So I don't know if that's too quirky, but Black Mountain, and then there's anyway, and then a lot of people like doing Nate Harrison.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one, but Black Mountain I can do. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Chris Taylor.
Yeah, thank you for all the information today. You talked about a lot of different elements of our training. Do you ever focus on breathing or different breathing techniques?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have one athlete that I work with, and I call it when she goes like on her wild horse. She doesn't do she takes off her heart rate monitor, doesn't use her power meter. And I'm like, all right, you go, you do you. And so I love it because we talk about our breathing a lot. And I tell a lot of my athletes, especially before race, if you are out of breath, you are going way too hard because that's VO2 max. Specifically about like deep belly breathing, I think that's a really good point and something that I should work on a little bit more with the efficiency of your breath. I may recommend that for people in zone 2-3 workouts to be like, okay, I really want you to think about, breathing into the base of your rib cage. And so is that what you're referring to?
It is, I mean, because we're trying to get oxygen out and we're trying to get CO2, or oxygen
Absolutely.
in and CO2 out, right? And I was at an event, so I'm a NICA coach and a CX coach, and with a lot of junior riders. And I was at an event with my daughter, and there was this gentleman that's riding by the loop, and you could just tell he was just panting, and his breaths were just so shallow. And I know he's a new rider, and I want to say something, but I don't want to be that guy, right, or that person. But but then you see other people and you can't even tell they're breathing, they're going as hard as they can go.
Yeah.
Right. But you don't, and it just feels like it's, it sounds weird to say, but breathing's maybe a lost art form, and those that do it well may have an advantage.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Chris, and something I should, well, you said it. I think it's an important part of the process, and you kind of picked on a small point in that you have to look at the whole cycle of how you're using energy, and you're like, how do I get as much energy, oxygen in? Like, that's where it starts. And you brought up a great point, and then the heart has to pump out to the lungs and and where in each stage can you maximize the most? And that's definitely a big part of it. And the exhale, a lot of people inhale in their nose and exhale out their mouth too. So I haven't done enough to have a theory, but a very good point.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for attending today. And please reach out if you need any questions.